Hey fellow nerds, today we are going to learn sampling. First, we'll understand the importance of sampling. Then we learn impulse train sampling, sampling by zero order hold, sampling theorem, and interpolation. Let us start by understanding why sampling is important. It is easier for us to work with discrete time signals rather than continuous time signals. The reason is processing discrete time signals is more flexible and preferable because nowadays we have so many discrete time systems available and they are inexpensive, lightweight, programmable, and easily reproducible. So, we use sampling as a bridge between continuous time and discrete time signals. What we do can be explained in three steps. First, we take the continuous time signal that we want to process, we convert it into a discrete time signal using sampling. And then we process the discrete time signal using a discrete time system. After that, we'll convert it back into a continuous time signal. Before we move on to anything, we have to learn certain things about a low pass filter. A low pass filter is a filter that only allows the signals with frequencies lesser than a certain cutoff frequency to pass through it. Its frequency response will look like this. It is 1 between minus omega c and omega c, and it is 0 everywhere else. So omega c here is the cutoff frequency of this particular low pass filter. We can write it like this. H of j omega is equal to 1 for all magnitude of omega being less than omega c, and it is 0 for all values of omega whose magnitude is greater than omega c. Assume you have a low pass filter whose frequency response is h of j omega as given over here. You're giving an input x of t and its Fourier transform is x of j omega. You're getting an output y of t, its Fourier transform is y of j omega. Obviously, y of j omega is going to be the product of x of j omega and frequency response h of j omega. But h of j omega is 0 for all values of omega less than minus omega c and greater than plus omega c. In between, it is 1. So when you multiply any x of j omega with h of j omega, all the components in x of j omega that has frequency greater than omega c or less than minus omega c will be multiplied with 0. So it will be gone. Only the frequencies between minus omega c and omega c will be multiplied by 1 and they will come out. So technically we can say only the signals whose magnitude of frequency is less than the cutoff frequency will be allowed to pass. That is why we call this a low pass filter. Since we have the frequency response, let us try to find the impulse response. We can use the inverse Fourier transform equation for that. H of t will be equal to 1 by 2 pi integral from minus infinity to infinity h of j omega e raised to j omega t d omega. Now h of j omega is 0 everywhere here. It is 1 between minus omega c and plus omega c. We don't have to integrate from minus infinity to infinity. We can integrate from minus omega c to plus omega c. So this becomes 1 by 2 pi integral from minus omega c to plus omega c. Between minus omega c and omega c, the value of h of j omega is 1. So 1 multiplied by e raised to j omega t d omega. So to get h of t, we just have to integrate this. H of t is equal to 1 by 2 pi integral of e raised to j omega t. Integration is with respect to omega, so it will be 1 by jt e raised to j omega t, giving limits from minus omega c to plus omega c. So we get 1 by j 2 pi t, giving the upper limit e raised to j omega ct minus giving the lower limit e raised to minus j omega ct. But if you apply Euler's relation, e raised to j omega ct minus e raised to minus j omega ct will become 2j sine omega ct. If I use that, I get h of t is equal to 1 by j 2 pi t multiplied by 2j sine omega c t. 2j over here and 2j over here will get cancelled. And finally we get The impulse response of a low pass filter whose cutoff frequency is omega c is going to be sine omega ct divided by pi t. Let us multiply and divide this with omega c. Then this will become omega c sine omega ct divided by pi omega c t. I have multiplied it with omega c, divided it with omega c. I am going to take pi out and put it over here. Now over here I have sine omega ct divided by omega ct. This is a sinc function. So we can write this is equal to omega c by pi multiplied by sinc of omega ct. So basically the impulse response is a sinc function. So on a graph it will look like this. It is a sinc function. It has its maximum value at t equal to 0. At t equal to 0, we get sinc of 0 and we know the value of sinc function when its argument is 0 is equal to 1. So we can say that at t equal to 0, h of t is going to be omega c divided by pi multiplied by sinc function of 0 is 1. So its maximum magnitude at t equal to 0 is omega c divided by pi. Let us go back to samples. We will learn how to represent a continuous time signal by its samples. For that, let us take an example of a continuous time signal. I am going to call it x1 of t. Now I'll be taking its samples at 0, t, 2t, 3t, minus 2t and at minus 3t, and I will get all of these samples. To understand that, let us consider another signal called x2 of t. x2 of t also has the same values at all of these sampling points. They have the same value here, 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 and here. Both the signal x1 of t and x2 of t have the same samples, which means if I am trying to find the original signal from the samples only, I won't be able to tell if it came from x1 of t or x2 of t. Or in simple words, we can say it is very difficult to recover our original signal from the samples that we got over here. So this is a problem that we have to solve. Keep this question behind your head. We'll answer it in this video. Let us move on and learn our first method of sampling. It is impulse train sampling. Let us first take a continuous time signal x of t. X of t looks like this. To sample it, I am going to use a periodic impulse train. It is periodic because the impulse is repeating at every multiple of t. So we call it p of t. Now what we're going to do is multiply x of t with p of t. Then we will get something that looks like this. This is the product of x of t and p of t. So at 0, we will have an impulse whose magnitude is the magnitude of x of t at 0. At t, we will have an impulse whose magnitude is the magnitude of x of t at t. At minus t, we have an impulse whose magnitude is the magnitude of x of t at minus t. The same way we can find the magnitude of all the impulses at all the times given over here. Now you can see that the envelope of these impulses that we got is basically x of t. We will call this xp of t. xp of t is the sampled version of x of t. So technically what happened is shown over here. We took x of t, it is a continuous time signal. We took p of t, it is a periodic impulse train. We multiplied them and we got the output xp of t, which is the sampled version of x of t. Here p of t, or the periodic impulse train, is our sampling function. T is our sampling time period. Omega s can be defined as 2 pi by t and it will be our sampling frequency. xp of t, the output, is our sampled signal. Now, p of t is the periodic impulse train. It has an impulse at 0, t, 2t, 3t, minus 2t, minus 3t, or basically at every multiple of t. So we can write p of t is the summation of all these impulses. So I will write delta of t. This will be the impulse at t equal to 0 plus delta of t minus t. This is the impulse over here. Plus there will be infinite terms like that. On the other side also, I will write delta of t plus t. This will account for the impulse at minus t plus infinite terms on that side also. Or we can write it as a summation. Summation from n equals minus infinity to infinity delta of t minus nt. Now we know xp of t, that is the sample signal, is the product of x of t and p of t. If you multiply this whole thing with x of t, every single term will be multiplied with x of t. So we get something like this. Every impulse is multiplied by x of t. So delta of t plus d will become x of t multiplied by delta of t plus d. Delta of t becomes x of t multiplied by delta of t, like that. Over here, when you multiplied x of t with this impulse, what you get is one impulse at t equal to 0, but its magnitude will be magnitude of x of t at t equal to 0, that is x of 0. When you multiplied x of t with this impulse, what you get is another impulse at t equal to t, but its magnitude is going to be magnitude of x of t at t. Similarly, here you get x of 2t. Here you get x of 3t. That means if you're taking x of t multiplied by delta of t plus t, you will be multiplying x of t with this impulse function at minus t, and you will be getting an impulse function at minus t whose magnitude is x of minus t. So instead of writing it this way, we can write x of minus t multiplied by delta of t plus t. Similarly, x of t delta of t, this will be equal to x of 0 delta of t. X of t delta of t minus t will be an impulse function at t whose magnitude is x of t. So if we write all the terms like that, we'll get something that looks like this. Let us write it as a summation. Xp of t is equal to summation from n equals minus infinity to infinity x of nt multiplied by delta of t minus nt. If I give n equals minus 1, I will get x of minus t delta of t plus t, which is what we have over here. If I give n equal to 0, I will get x of 0 delta of t, which is what we have over here. So this summation correctly represents xp of t, which is our sampled signal. We wrote the periodic impulse train as a summation. P of t is summation from n equals minus infinity to infinity delta of t minus nt. Now I want its Fourier transform p of j omega. In fact, when we were learning Fourier transform for periodic signals, we have solved a problem where we had to find out the Fourier transform of an impulse train, and we got 2 pi by t summation from k equals minus infinity to infinity delta of omega minus k omega s. Omega s is the sampling frequency or the frequency of our impulse train. If you don't remember this or if you haven't watched that video, I'm giving the video link and timestamp in the description. Please go watch. In the multiplication property of Fourier transform, we have learned if y of t is the product of two other signals x1 of t and x2 of t, then the Fourier transform of y of t, y of j omega, is 1 by 2 pi times the convolution of Fourier transform of x1 of t and x2 of t. That is 1 by 2 pi integral from minus infinity to infinity x1 of j theta, x2 of j omega minus theta d theta. Over here, we learned the sampled signal xp of t is the product of x of t and p of t. X of t is our continuous signal, p of t is our impulse train. So the Fourier transform of xp of t, xp of j omega will be like this: 1 by 2 pi integral from minus infinity to infinity. We need x1 of j theta. So here we'll have x of j theta multiplied by x2 of j omega minus theta. So here we have p of t, which means p of j omega minus theta d theta. We have p of j omega here. To get p of j omega minus theta, you will have to convert all the omegas here into omega minus theta. So our equation becomes like this: 1 by 2 pi integral from minus infinity to infinity x of j theta multiplied by p of j into omega minus theta will become 2 pi by t summation from k equals minus infinity to infinity delta of, instead of omega here I'll have to write omega minus theta. So I get omega minus theta minus k omega s d theta. There is a 2 pi over here, there is a 2 pi over here, they get cancelled. And 1 by t is a constant, it can come out of the integration. So if I apply all of this, I'll get xp of j omega like this. 1 by t integral from minus infinity to infinity x of j theta summation from k equals minus infinity to infinity delta of j into omega minus k omega is minus theta d theta. Instead of writing omega minus theta minus k omega is, I have written omega minus k omega is minus theta. Now there is an integration and a summation. I'm going to change their order. I will put the summation over here. Consider an impulse function delta of t. This is going to be equal to delta of minus t because impulse function only has non-zero value at t equal to 0. So if t is 0, minus t is also equal to 0. So delta of t is equal to delta of minus t. Which means over here I have delta of j into omega minus k omega is minus theta. It has to be equal to delta of j into theta minus omega minus k omega is. So I'm going to change their order. Instead of writing omega minus k omega is minus theta, I will write theta minus omega minus k omega is. Assume you're integrating from minus infinity to infinity the product of x of t and delta of t minus tau. When you multiply a continuous time signal x of t with an impulse function that exists only at tau, you will get the value of x of t at t equal to tau, that is x of tau. Even when you're integrating from minus infinity to infinity, you will get the same thing because delta of t minus tau is 0 at every value of t. This is basically the sampling property of impulse function. So the product is going to be value of x of t at t equal to tau or x of tau. This is exactly what is happening over here. Instead of tau, you have omega minus k omega is. Instead of t, there is theta here and here. So the result of this whole integration should be the value of x of j theta when theta is omega minus k omega is. Just like the value of this integration was the magnitude of x of t at t is equal to tau. So we get 1 by t summation from k equals minus infinity to infinity. The value of the integral is x of j into omega minus k omega is. So this defines xp of j omega, which is the Fourier transform of our output sampled signal. Let's put it in a box. xp of j omega is 1 by t times summation from k equals minus infinity to infinity x of j into omega minus k omega is. I am going to open the summation. Then I'll get xp of j omega is 1 by t multiplied by k ranges from minus infinity to infinity. So I'll start with etc. If k equal to minus 1, I get x of j into omega plus omega s. Plus if k equal to 0, x of j omega. Plus if k equal to 1, x of j into omega minus omega s plus infinite terms more. Now at k equal to 0 we got x of j omega. At k equal to 1 we got x of j into omega minus omega s, which is basically just a shifted version of x of j omega. This is x of j omega itself, but it has been shifted towards the right omega s units. Similarly, x of j omega plus omega s, we got this for k equals minus 1. But this is basically x of j omega itself, shifted omega s units towards the left. So basically we have an x of j omega at every multiple of omega s, and the summation is divided by t. Since we have x of j omega at every multiple of omega s, we can say xp of j omega is periodic. So we can conclude xp of j omega, which is the Fourier transform of our sampled signal x of t, is a periodic function of omega, and it consists of a superposition of shifted replicas of x of j omega, and it is scaled by 1 by t. Let us take an example to understand this better. Assume we started with a continuous time signal x of t, multiplied it with a periodic impulse signal p of t, and we got the sampled signal x p of t. Let us assume that the Fourier transform of x of t looks like this. It is triangular. Its maximum value is at omega equal to 0, it is 1, and it ranges from minus omega m to plus omega m. Now, p of t is the periodic impulse function, and we have found its Fourier transform. We got p of j omega is 2 pi by t times summation from k equals minus infinity to infinity delta of omega minus k omega s. Delta of omega minus k omega s is delta of omega that is shifted k omega s units towards the right, and k can take all the values from minus infinity to infinity. So if you take the summation, basically you will be getting 2 pi by t times, if I give k equals minus 1, I'll get delta of omega plus omega s. If I give k equal to 0, I get delta of omega. Plus if I give k equal to 1, I'll get delta of omega minus omega s. It goes on like that until infinite terms. So basically I have delta of omega at omega equal to 0. I have delta of omega at omega equal to omega s. I have delta of omega at omega equal to minus omega s. Or basically this is just impulse function delta of omega at every multiple of omega s. And its magnitude is 2 pi by t. So on a graph it will look like this. Now the Fourier transform of x p of t, which is the product of x of t and p of t, is going to be the convolution of x of j omega and p of j omega. We have already found it mathematically. Xp of j omega is 1 by t times summation from k equals minus infinity to infinity x of j into omega minus k omega s. And we defined it like this. Xp of j omega is a periodic function of omega consisting of a superposition of shifted replicas of x of j omega scaled by 1 by t. Or basically we have x of j omega at every integer multiple of omega s, and its magnitude is 1 by t. In this particular example, our x of j omega looks like this. It is triangular. Maximum magnitude is 1. It ranges from minus omega m to omega m. To plot xp of j omega, let us take a graph. I have already marked all the integer multiples of omega s here. We have 0, 1 omega s, 2 omega s, minus 1 omega s, minus 2 omega s, etc. And according to this equation, we should have x of j omega at every integer multiple of omega s. So it will look like this. We have a replica of x of j omega at 0, 1 at omega s, 1 at 2 omega s. It will go on until infinity. And on the other side, we have 1 at minus omega s, 1 at minus 2 omega s, and that will also go until minus infinity. Also from the equation, the magnitude of each of these replica is going to be 1 by t. Let us mark it over here. Now, if you take the total length from 0 to omega s, it is going to be greater than 2 omega m, because we have 1 omega m, 2 omega m, and there is something extra in between over here. So in this case, let's call it case 1. Omega s is greater than 2 omega m. Here, since omega s is greater than 2 omega m, we have some space between these 2 points. This whole thing is omega s, and this much is omega m. So this point is going to be omega s minus omega m. Due to symmetry, we can write this point is going to be negative of omega s minus omega m. Let us mark both of them. Now, if you want to find the original x of j omega from xp of j omega, all you have to do is take a low pass filter whose cutoff frequency is going to be between omega m and omega s minus omega m. The frequency response of such a low pass filter will look like this. To get a comparison, I am going to take it from here and place it over here. The low pass filter will only allow the frequencies between omega c and minus omega c to pass through it. That means only the first replica is going to pass through it. Every other replica will be attenuated. But there is one more problem. For our original x of j omega, magnitude is 1. Over here, the magnitude is 1 by t. When you're recovering x of j omega, you want the magnitude to be 1. For that, what you do is make sure the magnitude of h of j omega over here is t. So that when you multiply xp of j omega with h of j omega, between minus omega c and omega c, this triangle will be multiplied with t. So 1 by t will be multiplied with t and you will get 1 as required. Let's go to the next case where omega s is going to be equal to 2 times omega m. In this case, the adjacent replica are going to touch each other like this because here omega s is exactly omega m plus omega m. Whatever space was in between is now gone. Here also, to recover the original x of j omega, you can technically use a low pass filter. But the problem here is the low pass filter you are going to use should have a cutoff frequency that is exactly equal to omega m. Otherwise, it will not work. Practically, this is very difficult, so we prefer that there is some space between every replica. Let us take a third case where omega s, the sampling frequency, is less than 2 times the maximum frequency of x of j omega. In that case, the plot of xp of j omega will look like this. Since omega s is less than 2 times omega m, there won't be enough space for this replica to exist separately. Instead, they will start overlapping each other. Now, if you take a closer look over here, this much is contributed by this replica, but this much is also contributed by this replica. They both will get added. There will be twice of this small triangle, so it will be like this there. Similarly, over here also this much gets added. Here also a small triangle gets added, a small triangle gets added. So because of this overlapping, the resultant of xp of j omega will look like this. Very obviously, we can see that the shape of our original x of j omega is lost in this. So even by using a low pass filter, you will not be able to bring back x of j omega. From all these three cases, this is what we can conclude. For omega s being greater than 2 omega m, that is our case 1, x of t can be recovered exactly from xp of t by using a low pass filter. The low pass filter should satisfy two conditions. First is its gain should be t. Second condition is its cutoff frequency should be greater than omega m and less than omega s minus omega m. Let us bring back our case 1 to understand the two conditions. In the first case, omega s is greater than 2 omega m, so xp of j omega looks like this. There is some space between every adjacent replica. We only want this one to come out of the low pass filter, so we use a low pass filter whose frequency response will look like this. Its cutoff frequency should be between this point and this point, that is between omega m and omega s minus omega m. Also, when we take the product, we want the magnitude to be 1. So, we make sure the magnitude of h of j omega is t. So, when multiplied by 1 by t, we will get 1. So, technically what we are doing is, we take a low pass filter whose frequency response is h of j omega. We take xp of j omega, give it as an input. The output of the low pass filter is the recovered signal, so we call it xr of j omega. Now, xr of j omega will be the product of xp of j omega and h of j omega. In this case, if you multiply what we have over here with this one, the output is going to look like this. This is exactly how x of j omega looked like. So to get our original signal x of t, all you have to do is apply inverse Fourier transform on the recovered signal. So when omega is greater than 2 omega m, x of t can be recovered exactly from xp of t. How? By using a low pass filter. And the conditions for the low pass filter are it should have gain t, so that when you multiply xp of j omega with x of j omega, 1 by t will be multiplied by t and you will get 1 like this. The second condition is its cutoff frequency should be greater than omega m and less than omega s minus omega m, so that it will lie in the space between the two replica. Let us take a look at our example again. We assumed that our signal x of t had a Fourier transform that looked like this. It is triangular. The important part is it ranges from minus omega m to omega m. So we call this a band limited signal. It is called band limited because its frequency spectrum is between two extreme values of frequencies. Now assume that instead of using this example, we used another signal y of t whose Fourier transform is not band limited. It kind of looked like this. Now, when we try to find out xp of j omega, which is the Fourier transform of the sampled signal, we got replicas of x of j omega at every multiple of omega s. So here also, if I try to find out yp of j omega, I should have replicas of y of j omega at every multiple of omega s. Let us try to do it. I will get one replica at omega equal to 0. It will look like this. I will get another replica at omega s and it will look like this. I'll get one more replica at 2 omega s and it will look like this. I will also get replicas at minus omega s and minus 2 omega s. If I add all of them, it will look like this. So technically what I am trying to tell you is, it doesn't matter what value of omega s I take, there is going to be overlapping everywhere. Because y of j omega exists everywhere from minus infinity to infinity. So if it gets replicated at whatever interval, they are all going to overlap. This leads us to one of the most important concepts in sampling. If the continuous signal x of t we are taking is not band limited, then there is definitely going to be overlapping everywhere. So for sampling to work, it is very important that our signal is band limited, which means the Fourier transform of our signal x of t or the frequency spectrum of our signal x of t should range between two extreme values of frequencies. It should be band limited. Let us now conclude everything we learned. Assume we have a continuous time signal x of t. It is a band limited signal. Its x of j omega is 0 for all magnitudes of omega that is greater than omega m. So its frequency spectrum is limited between minus omega m and plus omega m. Then the signal x of t can be uniquely determined by its samples x of nt, that is its values at every integer multiple of t, if the sampling satisfies one condition. The sampling frequency omega s should be greater than 2 times omega m. Omega m is the maximum frequency in the frequency spectrum. Omega s is the sampling frequency. We can write it as 2 pi divided by t. So there are two conditions for us to be able to recover our original signal after sampling. The first one is our signal should be band limited. The second one is the sampling frequency we are taking omega s should be greater than 2 times omega m, the maximum frequency in the frequency spectrum of x of j omega. This is what we call the sampling theorem. The lower limit for sampling frequency is 2 omega m. It has a name. 2 omega m is called the Nyquist rate. So we can say that for us to be able to completely recover our original signal after sampling, the signal should be band limited and the sampling frequency should be greater than the Nyquist rate. Now this answers a question we had at the starting of this video. If the same samples can represent two different signals, how do we recover the original signal? Well, the original signal can be recovered exactly if two conditions are satisfied. The first one is that the signal has to be band limited, And the second one is that the sampling frequency has to be greater than 2 times the maximum frequency found in the frequency spectrum of our signal. If both these conditions are satisfied, then two different signals will not have the same samples. Samples of two different signals will be unique and will be exactly able to recover the original signal. Now that we learned everything about impulse train sampling, let us learn another kind of sampling, sampling with a zero order hold. We know that an ideal impulse function has infinitely short duration and infinitely large amplitude. It is not possible practically to realize it. Taking that into consideration, we can use sampling with a zero order hold. What it does is very simple. It samples our continuous time signal x of t at a given instant and then holds that value until the next instant at which the sample is taken again. For example, let us take a signal x of t. If you take impulse train sampling, the sample signal will look like this. You will get impulses at every multiple of t, and the magnitudes of impulses are going to be the magnitude of x of t at that particular instant. Now, instead of impulse train sampling, if you take zero order hold, it will look like this. It takes a sample at minus 40, then holds it until minus 3t, where it has to take the next sample. The next sample is taken, then it is held. At minus 2t, the next sample is taken. It is held until minus t. At minus t, the next sample is taken. It is held. Again, sample is taken. It is held. Sample is taken, held. So, this is what a zero order hold does. It samples our signal x of t at an instant and then holds that value until the next instant at which the sample is taken again. Let us now have a comparison between these two. xp of t is the output of impulse sampling, xo of t is the output of zero order hold sampling. Assume instead of taking impulses here, we took rectangles. For example, the first one, instead of being an impulse like this, it is a rectangle like this. The second one is a rectangle like this. The third one is like this. Fourth one like this. The next one like this. Now, if you take a look at the envelope of this, we get something that looks like this. And it is basically what we have over here at zero order sampling. So technically we can say that the zero order hold sampling output xo of t is nothing but the convolution between xp of t and some rectangular signal. xp of t is the product of x of t, the original signal, and the periodic impulse train. So we can show it like this. Product of x of t and p of t gives us xp of t. Now, if you want xo of t from xp of t, all you have to do is make it pass through a system whose impulse response is a rectangular function. The input to this system is xp of t, which is the output of our impulse sampling. Its impulse response is a function ho of t, its magnitude is 1 and it ranges from 0 to t. The output is going to be the convolution of input and impulse response. And over here, it is going to be the output of zero order hold sampling, that is xo of t. We can consider this to be the idea of a zero order hold so that we can use it to find the mathematics of it. So if you take a continuous time signal x of t that looks like this, give it as an input into a zero order hold, you will get an output xo of t and it will look like this. In principle, we can consider that this is what is happening inside the zero order hold. You give x of t as the input, it is first multiplied with p of t, which is a periodic impulse train, which gives us xp of t, the sampled version of x of t. It is then passed through a system whose impulse response is ho of t. It is a rectangular function. The output of the system will be the convolution between input xp of t and impulse response ho of t. The output will be identical to xo of t that we get over here. Now, the most important thing to keep in mind here is this is not what happens inside a zero order hold. This is the idea from the relationship between xp of t and xo of t that we developed so that it is easier for us to figure out the math of zero order hold. Now assume that we have a zero order output XO of t. We want to reconstruct the original signal. For that, I am applying XO of t as an input to a new system whose impulse response is HR of t and frequency response is HR of j omega. I am calling it the reconstruction filter. So R here and R here stands for reconstruction. The output I am getting from here is R of t, and we are going to assume that it is going to be our original signal X of t. So to reconstruct the signal, we are processing x0 of t with another LTI system whose impulse response is HR of t and frequency response is HR of j omega. Our task now is to find out what is the impulse response and what is the frequency response required for the reconstruction filter so that we can reconstruct our original signal from XO of t. To do that, let us first compare it with what we did in impulse train sampling to get our original signal back. We had x of t, it got multiplied with p of t, and we got the sampled signal xp of t. To get the original signal back, we gave it as an input to a low pass filter whose frequency response looked like this, and we got the output xr of t, which was equal to our original signal x of t. Let us compare this with what we have over here for sampling by zero order hold. We can see that if this whole thing is equivalent to the low pass filter, since the input is the same, the output should also be the same. So the condition to be satisfied for R of t to be equal to X of t is simple. The interconnection of these two systems should be equivalent to a low pass filter like this. So we have a zero order hold, after which comes a reconstruction filter. Let us assume that the interconnection of these two has a frequency response which is h of j omega. Now the condition for the reconstructed signal R of t to be equal to the original signal X of t is that the cascade of the reconstruction filter with the zero order hold should be an ideal low pass filter with frequency response h of j omega. So h of j omega should be like this. In simple words, h of j omega should be the frequency response of an ideal low pass filter and it should look like this. Since this is a series interconnection, h of j omega is going to be the product of frequency response of this system and frequency response of this system. Frequency response of the reconstruction filter is hr of j omega, which is what we have to find out. For that, we will first have to find out the frequency response of the zero order hold. Let us try to do that now. We have the impulse response of the zero order hold. HO of t is given. So to get the frequency response, all we have to do is take the Fourier transform of what we have over here. Now I'm going to do it using a trick because all I can see is HO of t is actually a time shifted version of something else whose Fourier transform I already know. If you take a closer look, you can see that HO of t, which looks like this, is a time shifted version of this one. If you shift this t by 2 units towards the right, you will get this. We already know the Fourier transform of a rectangular function. In this case, it is going to be 2 sine omega t by 2 divided by omega. T by 2 comes from here. Now to get the Fourier transform of the time shifted version, we'll have to apply time shifting property. Here we have a time shifting of t by 2 units. So the Fourier transform is going to be e raised to minus j omega t by 2 multiplied by the original Fourier transform 2 sine omega t by 2 divided by omega. So we can say that the frequency response of the zero order hold HO of j omega is e raised to minus j omega t by 2 multiplied by 2 sine omega t by 2 divided by omega. So we got HO of j omega is e raised to minus j omega t by 2 multiplied by 2 sine omega t by 2 divided by omega. This is the frequency response of this system. Frequency response of this system is HR of j omega, which is what we have to find out. the frequency response of their series interconnection is h of j omega. So we can write the connection between them. H of j omega will be the product of HO of j omega and HR of j omega. So we can write HR of j omega, which is the frequency response of our reconstruction filter, is going to be H of j omega divided by HO of j omega. We get HR of j omega is equal to H of j omega divided by HO of j omega is e raised to minus j omega t by 2 multiplied by 2 sine omega t by 2 divided by omega. Let us take e raised to minus j omega t by 2 to the numerator. It will become e raised to plus j omega t by 2. Let's put this in a box. So we can conclude that the reconstruction filter should have a frequency response equal to e raised to j omega t by 2 multiplied by h of j omega, which is the frequency response of the low pass filter, divided by 2 sine omega t by 2 divided by omega. Now that we learned both methods of sampling, let us move on to the next part, which is reconstruction of a signal using interpolation. Interpolation is actually the method that is used to generate the intermediate values between the non-samples. Because after sampling, we'll have some sample values that are non. We can use interpolation method to generate the values between them. There are different methods of interpolation. As an example, let us see linear interpolation. In this case, the adjacent sample points are connected by a straight line to get the intermediate values. As you can see in the figure, we have samples at all these points shown over here. And to get the intermediate values, all we have done is connect the adjacent dots like this. Now, if we take a closer look, it is obvious that the signal that we got is very much different from our original signal. But if the sampled points are really close to each other, then the reconstructed signal will be exactly equal to our original signal. Another example for interpolation is using zero order hold. Here also we can see that the reconstructed signal is very much different from our original signal, but if the samples are taken sufficiently closer rather than like this, the reconstructed signal will exactly look like our original signal. In short, for a band limited signal, if the sampling instants are sufficiently close, then the signal can be reconstructed exactly by using a low pass filter. This actually comes directly from our sampling theorem. According to sampling theorem, omega s is supposed to be greater than 2 omega m, which means omega s or the sampling frequency should be sufficiently large. But we know the time period of the sampling Ts is 2 pi by omega s. It is inversely proportional to omega s. So if omega s should be sufficiently large, that means Ts should be sufficiently small. That is, for the reconstructed signal to exactly look like our original signal, the time period at which the samples are taken should be really small. The samples should be really close to each other. If so, we can simply use a low pass filter to get our input back. Let us learn another method of interpolation. Consider we have xp of t, which is the sampled signal. We are giving it as an input into a low pass filter whose impulse response is h of t. The output we get is xr of t. Xr of t is the reconstructed signal. Now, when we learned impulse train sampling, we found an expression for the sampled signal xp of t. xp of t can be written as summation from n equals minus infinity to infinity x of nt delta of t minus nt. This is the input to our low pass filter and output is xr of t. So the output xr of t is going to be the convolution of xp of t and the impulse response h of t. So it is going to be integral from minus infinity to infinity xp of tau h of t minus tau d tau. We have xp of t here. To get xp of tau, I'll have to change the t over here into tau. Let us replace xp of tau with that. We have an integration and we have a summation. I'm going to change their orders. Now the integration over here is with respect to the variable tau. X of nt doesn't have anything to do with tau. Let us take it out of the integration. Inside the integration, we have delta of tau minus nt and h of t minus tau. I am going to change their orders. Now we have delta of tau minus nt here. This is non-zero only when tau is equal to nt. That means we don't really have to integrate from minus infinity to infinity because this part of the product is going to be 0 everywhere other than tau equal to nt. So instead of finding the integration from minus infinity to infinity, we can simply find the value of this product at tau equal to nt. If we do that, this is what we get. Summation from n equals minus infinity to infinity, x of nt. We want the value of this product at tau equal to nt. So tau over here will become nt, tau over here will become nt. We get h of t minus nt, delta of nt minus nt. But this becomes delta of 0. Delta of 0 is 1. So let us remove it. Finally, we get xr of t, which is the output of our low pass filter, or the reconstructed signal, is summation from n equals minus infinity to infinity, x of nt, h of t minus nt. So we got an expression for the output of the low pass filter. In the beginning of this video, we learned that for an ideal low pass filter, the impulse response h of t is given like this: sine of omega ct divided by pi t. To write it as a sinc function, I multiplied it with omega c and divided with omega c, and I got omega c by pi multiplied by sine of omega ct divided by omega ct. Now what we have over here is a sinc function. There is one small difference to make here. When we learned sampling, we saw that the low pass filter that we are taking should have a magnitude that is equal to t, so that when it multiplies with 1 by t, which is the magnitude of the sampled signal, we will get 1, which is the original. So over here, we'll have to make a small updation. For an ideal low pass filter required, that is when magnitude is equal to t, h of t will not be sine of omega ct by pi t. Instead, it will be sine of omega ct by pi t multiplied by t. So over here also we can put a t. H of t will be omega ct divided by pi sine of omega ct divided by omega ct. So we have h of t, the impulse response of the low pass filter required. In this equation, we want h of t minus nt. We can easily write what is h of t minus nt. H of t minus nt is the same equation, but instead of t, we will write t minus nt. So we get omega ct divided by pi sine of omega c multiplied by t minus nt divided by omega c multiplied by t minus nt. Let us use this over here in this equation. Then the reconstructed signal or the output of the low pass filter xr of t will be summation from n equals minus infinity to infinity x of nt multiplied by omega ct by pi sine of omega c into t minus nt divided by omega c into t minus nt. Omega ct by pi is a constant. Let us take it out of the summation. Sine of omega c into t minus nt divided by omega c into t minus nt is the sinc function. It is sinc of omega c into t minus nt. If we apply that, the equation will look like this. xr of t is omega ct by pi summation from n equals minus infinity to infinity x of nt multiplied by sinc of omega c into t minus nt. Let us put this in a box. I know you might be feeling the equation has become very complicated. It is going out of your hands. But trust me when I tell you, this is a very simple equation. I'll show you how. We got xr of t is omega ct by pi, summation from n equals minus infinity to infinity, x of nt multiplied by sinc of omega c into t minus nt. Here n takes values from minus infinity to infinity. Let us take n equal to 0. Then x of nt will become x of 0. Sinc of omega c into t minus nt will become sinc of omega c into t. Nt becomes 0. Let's write it down. Sinc of omega c t. Plus, let's take the next term where n is equal to 1. Then x of nt will become x of t multiplied by sinc of omega c multiplied by t minus nt becomes t minus t. On the other side, if n is equal to minus 1, it looks like this. X of nt will be x of minus t, sinc of omega c multiplied by t minus nt becomes t plus nt. Do you remember in impulse train sampling, we had a very similar summation. At n equal to 0, we got x of 0 delta of t. At n equal to 1, we got x of t delta of t minus t. At n equal to minus 1, we got x of minus t delta of t plus t. This is exactly what we are getting over here, but instead of the impulse function, we are taking time shifted sinc functions. So we can say that xr of t, which is a reconstructed signal or the output of the low pass filter, is simply a summation of scaled sinc functions. It is scaled because every sinc function is being multiplied by the value of x of t at that sampling point. Let us use a graphical comparison to understand the idea better. Let us consider a band limited signal x of t. In time domain, this is how it looks like. In frequency domain, its frequency spectrum is limited between two frequencies, so it is band limited. When we took impulse train sampling, this is what we got. We got impulses at every multiple of t, and the impulses had magnitudes that were equal to the magnitude of x of t at that particular instant of time. According to this equation, everything will be the same except instead of impulse functions, we will have sinc functions. Let us see how it will look like. At minus 2t, instead of this impulse function, I will get a sinc function whose magnitude will be the magnitude of x of t at minus 2t, which is exactly this much. It will look like this. Its magnitude over here is equal to the magnitude of x of t at t equal to minus 2t. Now, at t equals minus t, instead of this impulse function, I will get another sinc function whose magnitude is going to be this much. It will look like this. Again, at t equal to 0, instead of this impulse function, I should get another sinc function whose magnitude will be this much. It will look like this. Now, at t, instead of this impulse function, we have a sinc function that has magnitude this much. At 2t, instead of this impulse function, we'll have a sinc function with magnitude this much. And at 3t, instead of this impulse function, we'll have a sinc function whose magnitude is this much. If I add all of it, it will look like this. You can clearly see how the envelope of all these sinc functions is giving us our original signal x of t. If the samples are sufficiently closer to each other, that is, if the sinc functions are sufficiently closer to each other, we will be easily able to recover x of t from xp of t. So we can conclude that the reconstructed signal or the output of the low pass filter is simply a superposition of sinc functions. And I hope you understand how simple the equation you have over here is, even though it looks a little bit scary. In fact, this equation has a name. It is called band limited interpolation. Because the two conditions for which this will work are x of t is band limited and sampling frequency satisfies sampling theorem, which means omega s should be greater than 2 times omega m. Let us bring back two out of the three cases we learned in impulse train sampling. In the first case, omega s was greater than 2 omega m. In the second case, it is less than 2 omega m. In the first case, we had space between the replicas, so we were able to recover the original signal easily by using a low pass filter. In the second case, on the other hand, the replicas overlapped and we got something that looked like this. Now, this happened because omega s, or our sampling frequency, is less than 2 omega m, which means the sampling time period Ts, being inversely proportional to omega s, is too large. That is, we were not taking enough samples. So we can say that whatever is happening here is due to the effect of undersampling, and we call it aliasing. So if omega s is less than 2 omega m, x of t is not recoverable using a low pass filter. Even if you pass it through a low pass filter, the reconstructed signal xr of t will not be equal to our original signal x of t because we haven't taken enough samples. We will have the value of the signal at the sampling points, but we will not be able to apply interpolation. That is, we will not be able to find the intermediate points using interpolation because omega s is less than 2 omega m. So we can write values of the reconstructed signal at multiples of t, the time period, is going to be the values of the original signal x of t at multiples of t. Let us take an example to learn this better. X of t is equal to cos of omega naught t. We already know how the Fourier transform of cos omega naught t looks. We have an impulse function at plus omega naught and one at minus omega naught. The magnitude is going to be pi for both of them. Consider the first case. Here I am taking the sampling frequency omega s to be 6 times omega naught. We know according to sampling theorem all we need is 2 times omega naught, but here I have taken 6 times omega naught. It is definitely supposed to work, so let us see if it will work or not. xp of j omega, or the Fourier transform of the sampled signal, will look like this. I am taking omega naught to be this much and omega s to be 6 times that. We know what happens when we take the samples, right? We'll find replicas of x of j omega at every multiple of omega s. We already have one at 0. We'll have one at omega s and minus omega s also. Now, this much is omega s, this much is omega m. So what is left is going to be omega s minus omega m. So this point will be omega s minus omega m. Consequently, due to symmetry, this point is going to be minus of omega s minus omega m. We have already figured out earlier that for exact reconstruction, we need a low pass filter whose cutoff frequency is going to be between omega naught and this point, which is omega s minus omega naught. Assume we are using a low pass filter whose frequency response looks like this. For comparison, I will take it from here and put it over here. Obviously, only these two frequency components can pass through the low pass filter. So its output, the reconstructed signal, is going to look like this. But this is simply the Fourier transform of cos omega naught t. So we can write xr of t is equal to cos of omega naught t, which is exactly the same as our original signal x of t. Just like we thought, when we took omega s to be 6 times omega naught, we got the output of the low pass filter exactly equal to our original signal. Let us take a second case. Here omega s is 3 times omega naught. Let us see how xp of j omega will look like in this case. To make the relation omega is equal to 3 omega naught from omega s is equal to 6 omega naught, what I have done here is I doubled omega naught. Omega naught was this much in the first case. Now I have made it double. You can see the sampling frequency is still the same. But the relation between omega s and omega naught is now omega s is 3 times omega naught. So the first replica will be around omega equal to 0. We'll also have a replica at omega s and another at minus omega s. Since I'm increasing the value of omega naught, you can see the impulses are getting farther away from each other. For comparison, let us bring back the frequency response of our low pass filter also. Here also you can see only these two are going to pass through the low pass filter, which means our output will look like this. The reconstructed signal or the output of the low pass filter will have one impulse at omega naught and one at minus omega naught. But this is the Fourier transform of cos omega naught t. So here also we can write x r of t is equal to cos omega naught t, which is exactly equal to our original signal x of t. Now let us take the third case. Here the sampling frequency omega s is 1.5 times omega naught. Clearly it is less than the Nyquist rate. Let us see what happens. I have taken minus omega s and omega s here. I need omega s to be 1.5 times omega naught. So I will take omega naught and minus omega naught like this. Minus omega naught is over here, omega naught is over here, and clearly omega s is 1.5 times omega naught. Now the first replica will be about 0. So I'll have an impulse here and an impulse here. I'll have another replica about omega s like this. So it will be like this. I will have one more replica about minus omega s. Let us take another replica about minus omega s. It will be like this. For comparison, let us bring the frequency response of our low pass filter. This much is omega s and this much is omega naught. So this point is going to be omega s minus omega naught. Similarly, due to symmetry, this point is going to be negative of omega s minus omega naught. Now for comparison, let us bring the frequency response of our low pass filter. Let's take a closer look. We can see that the frequency that is going to pass through the low pass filter is not omega naught anymore. The impulse at omega naught and the impulse at minus omega naught is now outside the low pass filter. What is inside is the impulse at minus of omega s minus omega naught and the impulse at omega s minus omega naught. So the reconstructed signal or the output of the low pass filter is going to look like this. We have an impulse at omega s minus omega naught and minus of omega s minus omega naught. This is not the Fourier transform of cos omega naught t. This is the Fourier transform of cos of omega s minus omega naught into t. So our output here x r of t is cos of omega s minus omega naught multiplied by t. This is clearly not equal to our original signal. And we know why this happened. It is because our sampling was not enough. Sampling frequency is less than 2 times the maximum frequency in the frequency spectrum of our original signal. So when we took omega is equal to 6 omega naught, the reconstructed signal was equal to the original signal. When we took omega s is 3 omega naught, again the reconstructed signal was equal to the original signal. But when we took omega s to be 1.5 omega naught, the reconstructed signal was not equal to x of t. Instead, we got something like cos of omega s minus omega naught into t. Instead of omega naught, we got omega s minus omega naught, which means when aliasing occurs, original frequency omega naught takes on the identity of a lower frequency omega s minus omega naught. It will be better to learn this using graphs. Assume this is our original signal and we want to take its samples. We want the samples at all these points shown over here. So the sampled signal is going to look like this. To get the reconstructed signal, all we have to do is take the envelope of this. If we do that, the reconstructed signal will look like this. The reconstructed signal looks exactly like our original signal, so we can confidently say there is no aliasing happening here. This means that the sampling frequency we took has to be greater than the maximum frequency in the frequency spectrum of the original signal. Now, I want to take another example where the sampling frequency is less than the maximum frequency in the frequency spectrum. But instead of lowering the sampling frequency, I am going to take the same sampling frequency, but I will increase the frequency of the signal so that sampling frequency will become less than the maximum frequency in the frequency spectrum. Our original signal will then look like this. Clearly, I have increased its frequency. I am going to take samples at exactly the same points. If I take all the samples out, it will look like this. I haven't done any manipulation. You can check if the samples are the same as what we get over here. Now to get the reconstructed signal, I have to take the envelope of the samples. If I do that, it will look like this. Very clearly, you can see that the reconstructed signal is not the same as the original signal. So we can say aliasing is happening. In the first case, if omega naught was the frequency of the original signal, the frequency of the reconstructed signal was also omega naught. In the second case, if omega naught was the frequency of the original signal, the frequency of the reconstructed signal is not omega naught. It is omega s minus omega naught. We have written here when aliasing occurs, original frequency omega naught takes on the identity of a lower frequency. That is why the reconstructed signal has a lower frequency. Omega is minus omega naught. That's all about it for today. See you in the next video. And don't forget to subscribe.